The following is a special presentation of WAAY 31 News.
It was like the Grim Reaper. It just took me.
Can't tell you how many funerals I've been to for overdoses.
It's the worst nightmare of a parent, of an addict.
From the struggle to keep it off the streets to the loss of life, we're looking at how drug addiction is affecting our communities. North Alabama's drug addiction.
Years ago, drugs were made at a place like this. It's what gave Sand Mountain its nickname, Meth Mountain.
But drugs aren't necessarily made here anymore, at least not to the extent that they were 10 years ago. And in order for law enforcement to keep up with the evolving drug industry, they need to understand the business behind drugs.
Everything stems from the drugs.
It doesn't matter what part of North Alabama you live in, drugs are in your community.
The demand is always huge for drugs. It's the #1 complaint. I'm sure every sheriff would say that in every county.
Our main focus is to take that off the streets and to clean up as much as we can so that we can continue to grow as a community.
But where these drugs come from is far different from even just 20 years ago.
The border crisis extends much farther past the border. It goes into every community in the United States of America.
Drugs smuggled across the Mexican border finding their way into every nook and cranny of America, and North Alabama is no exception.
It's totally different from the way it used to be, just like when you used to have your meth labs nonstop, and that was the big thing back years ago. Now you're basically changed from the meth lab, meth house to just the meth dealers.
Compared to 2019, Mexican authorities saw a nearly 500% jump in fentanyl seizures in 2020 alone. But some drugs were still able to slip across the border.
From our intel and what we get, most of the drugs that we get are not from here. They come from the border or from Mexico or from other states where they're hubbed out at. We're kind of like sitting in a neutralized area where people pass through with them due to the highways. And of course you have, local people in your counties who are your drug dealers and spread those drugs out.
That's why law enforcement all across North Alabama work together to get drugs off the streets. Each of the 10 sheriff's offices across the region have some type of narcotics division or drug task force. Many of their agents working undercover in plain clothes to help infiltrate drug rings and eventually make a bust.
No one wants to take credit as long as we get the dope off the street.
Huntsville is now the most populous city in Alabama. With that title comes a bullseye for drug traffickers.
It makes us a target for these drug dealers to come in because they know we have a little extra income that might want to be spent on drugs.
Captain Jerry King with Huntsville Police agrees with his fellow law enforcement officers in North Alabama. Fentanyl is the newest, most popular, deadly drug in the region.
Now, most recently, we're seeing an uptick in fentanyl, and not just the fact that fentanyl is being sold, it's the fact that the buyers are actually requesting fentanyl, which is now leading to a lot of our overdose cases.
That demand has been constant across the valley, and most everyone has been affected in one way or another, whether it's their own battle or loved ones.
But once someone starts using, how do they stop? How do they prevent themselves from living in conditions like this? Each story is different, but their goal the same, a drug-free life.
Once I did it the first time, it was kind of over from there.
This disease does not discriminate.
Nobody wakes up and says, I want to be an addict.
Once you're in it, it's nearly impossible to get out. That's how Julie Coleman describes addiction. Her drug use began when she was just a teen.
I'm never going to do meth, never. But I ended up doing it, and then it was like the Grim Reaper. It just took me.
For more than a decade, Coleman abused meth. She lost jobs, housing, and cycled in and out of the Morgan County Jail. As her addiction grew, so did her role in the epidemic, eventually dealing the same drugs she was abusing.
It's not because you're trying to get rich, it's because you're trying to survive.
Despite the odds, Coleman eventually fought her demons. Thanks to long-term recovery, she's been sober for more than 12 years.
It can affect anyone.
Olivia Eichert is also more than a decade sober and now directs a women's recovery center, A New Beginning, in Florence.
About 4 years, I guess, after I got sober, the girls started coming in, and it was the heroin.
The opioid epidemic hit Alabama hard in the 2000s, with the number of overdose deaths climbing 82% from 2006 to 2014. Turn the page to 2021. Eichert is noticing a startling trend.
A lot of our clients come in, they test positive for fentanyl, and they had no idea they've even used it.
Rendell Drummond runs a men's recovery center, Living Free Recovery, in Morgan County. He's noticing the same trend.
And that essentially that's what kills them, is the fentanyl. 8 years ago, I didn't even know what Narcan was.
Both of the centers have something in common, a treatment plan longer than 30 days. A crucial weapon to help those who feel there's no end in sight.
I went to treatment 4 times before I got sober, and the first 3 times it was short term.
Eichert says recovering is not just choosing to say no to drugs, but learning how to live life sober.
When we're out there using our behaviors, it's more like a survival instinct. So we just help them develop new life skills to live life on life's terms without the cushion of drugs and alcohol.
Drummond's program is helping more than 50 men across 2 campuses, but he knows it's not enough. Many addicts don't have the means to get sober, even with more than 40 state-funded rehabs in Alabama.
It's hard to access detox in our state because there's not much state-funded detox.
Julia Rowland was able to find a treatment center through a Huntsville organization, Partnership for a Drug-Free Community. It offers a recovery resource hub to refer addicts to a facility. She's now 15 months sober from IV meth.
Being able to have the resources in the local community and people to be able to just walk in and feel comfortable, I think that's the best part about it.
It may seem as easy as walking through a door for Rowland, but it took hitting rock bottom to reach out for help.
Right before I went to treatment, I was in a camper by somebody's grandparents' house at 7 in the morning. Doing drugs, and I'm looking around and people are passed out from heroin and all kinds of stuff, and I'm just like, this is what I'm doing. This is my life. These are who I'm surrounding myself with, and I just couldn't do it anymore.
Rowland knows she's not the same person she was 15 months ago.
I had to change my people, places, and things, so I had to change everything, but the support group was the biggest part of my early sobriety.
Her recovery continues, as does for every addict, each going about it their own way. Even years after her last drug use, Coleman constantly reminds herself why it's important to stay clean.
People lose everything, all their friends, their families. But I had a mom who, I don't want to cry, but she stuck it out the whole time, and she prayed for me, and her prayers actually got answered.
Looking back, Coleman credits law enforcement for getting her sober. Those agencies are not only trying to track down drugs, but help those who are using.
Still, a lot goes into these operations, both big and small ones, and counties all across North Alabama are presented with their own sets of challenges, but working together is what's proven to be the most effective. You hear it all the time.
Able to seize a large amount of illegal drugs. A drug and weapons bust in Huntsville.
The Madison County man is facing drug charges.
A big drug bust in Huntsville.
Law enforcement in North Alabama working every day to get drugs off the streets, but the hurdles that authorities in each county are facing and who they're targeting is a little bit different.
It's a task force where we're having a 10 to 14, 15-man drug unit.
Organizations, in our task force, we try to take down organizations.
In DeKalb County, agents nowadays finding more drugs in car trunks than homes.
Got a broad band of people from other states and areas coming through our county that, are possibly trafficking illegal drugs.
Namely Atlanta, on their way to cities like Huntsville, Birmingham, or Nashville.
And that's one reason we created our criminal interdiction unit, which has been, very successful to putting a stop to a lot of that.
That criminal interdiction unit started 3 years ago, and since then, DeKalb County has seen a 300% jump in drug arrests, major crimes dropping by a third.
Problem when you coming in would be drugs, so we beefed up the task force.
The sheriff let us tag along on Warrant Roundup Day, a day dedicated to getting drugs off the streets, serving 75 warrants and putting 40 people in handcuffs. Quick action to stop more crime in the future.
Something I always like to tell people is drugs, in my opinion, in 22 years of law enforcement, is definitely the root of all crime.
If traffickers are able to get drugs through DeKalb County and into Huntsville, the North Alabama Drug Task Force is waiting for them.
We have to stay in front of it because if we don't, we will get caught behind. We're always trying to catch up to that game.
This task force is part of Huntsville Police, which also works closely with ALEA and even the FBI.
Work outside the area of just this immediate Huntsville metro and we're having some success with getting fentanyl and heroin before it even gets here.
Madison County Sheriff Kevin Turner calls his county a drug hub, now including the state's most populous city. He says more people means more drugs in the community.
Fentanyl that you talked about, heroin, the ice and the methamphetamines just comes in bigger volumes. I mean, the more population you get, the more people's here.
Captain Jerry King agrees.
The growth of Huntsville and our economic base that we have, it's a perfect market for drug dealers to take advantage of.
In 2020 alone, the North Alabama Drug Task Force seized over $8.4 million worth of drugs and nearly 250,000 grams of illegal substances.
Their main priority is to be proactive and to take drugs and as many guns off the street, and it's been a big-time success for us.
Possibly the most devastating effect drug use has is its impact on children, whether it's a newborn experiencing symptoms of withdrawal or a child killed by fentanyl exposure.
It's hard to ignore the consequences drugs in our community can have on young people who, for some, are born into the cycle of addiction.
They're definitely affected in a very negative way, and a lot of times the cycle just continues.
Olivia Eichert considers herself lucky. More than 10 years ago, she held 2 titles, mother and drug addict.
Our kids will not get us sober either. I've loved my children.
Eichert wasn't born into a cycle of addiction. After she started using drugs, her family took her kids, caring for them while she got clean. But that's not the case for a lot of addicts.
A lot of these women, their children are going into the system, into foster care, or the kids are being left with the grandparents, and a lot of times they use, so the children aren't necessarily in a better environment.
According to the State Department of Human Resources, the number of children in the foster care system slightly dipped over the past 3 years. In 2018, more than 3,800 kids were in the system. Nearly 46% of those kids had a parent with a substance abuse issue. Just last year, in 2020, more than 3,300 kids were in the system. About 44% of kids had a parent with a substance abuse issue. The number of child abuse and neglect cases reported also decreased last year. There were more than 26,000 reports in 2020, down about 2,000 from 2019. DHR says the coronavirus pandemic caused a lot of kids to stay at home, away from schools, and people outside their household who could report abuse and neglect if children don't themselves. DHR also keeps a record of children who test positive for substances at birth. Those figures vary over the past 3 years. Huntsville Hospital pediatrician Stephanie Israel says she hasn't noticed a major spike in Huntsville, but the hospital will drug test every expecting mother that comes in.
They're affected by this. They're dependent on it because their mothers were dependent on it.
But not every mother who tests positive for drugs is reported to DHR.
It really depends on what the mom's story is.
Israel says mothers may be prescribed drugs that help with their addiction like Suboxone, and it's completely legal. But if there are concerns, DHR will get involved. Israel says she never judges a mother. She knows recovery can be long and a hard journey for both the mom and the baby.
We're really trying to focus on keeping mothers and babies together in the room, really increasing what we call non-pharmacological management. So that means management without drugs.
She's found by treating every mom with respect and encouragement, some choose to change.
Where we have this little glimmer, we can take this moment where we can make a difference. Let's make a change. Let's get you into a treatment program. Let's get you to the right place where you need to be. I mean, sometimes we can flip a switch and make things better.
For many mothers dealing with addiction, the decision to flip that switch comes with one goal in mind: being reunited with their children. For Eichert, she's thankful her sobriety did just that.
My kids are doing very well. The blessings with my family, those relationships have all been restored. I could just go on and on about the blessings of, just getting sober and doing the work.
The worst case for an addict, an overdose. OD calls has spiked significantly here in Madison County just within the past year.
The coroner now spending more time than ever before responding to these overdose calls, a painful trend for families all across North Alabama.
Funny, loving, caring. He had a goofiness about him.
Denise Spiller is one proud mom.
He played soccer from 5 years old till 15.
He is Austin, Denise's son, born in 1992 in Wisconsin. There, Denise raised Austin and her daughter Ashley before moving down to North Alabama.
He was a sweet kid.
When Austin was 13 years old, his sister had her wisdom teeth taken out. The two tried painkillers, Austin's first exposure to drugs.
Now, he was very young at that time, so I don't know that it began his addiction, but the taste for it started that young.
A veteran, Denise would often have to leave her kids, serving her country overseas.
Felt like my deployment to Iraq right before he turned 16 led him to even start dealing with that.
When Denise got back to the States in 2008, Austin admitted to trying morphine for the first time. And not long after, he was arrested, high on the drug.
So that's when I started really watching, his actions.
Austin's addiction would only intensify. Denise brought him to rehab where he started Suboxone, a medication to help him manage his addiction, something Denise thought was the right move. But turns out, he was just using Suboxone to get to his drugs of choice, morphine and fentanyl patches.
Again, as a mother at that time, you're thinking, okay, he's going to be better after a 15-day stay. And you're thinking it's over. Little did I know, and I started going to Al-Anon at that time, that it's forever as an addict.
Not long after, Denise went on a trip with her National Guard unit. It was the week after Memorial Day 2013, the time she would say goodbye to her son for the last time.
Couldn't get in touch with him. Kept calling him, called my daughter. It's very common during that year to call my daughter and say, hey, go check on him. I can't get in touch with them. We'd find them passed out or whatever. Well, that was the time when, she found him.
Austin died June 8th, 2013, leaving behind a grieving family. Now, Denise uses Austin's death to help others by volunteering at local organizations to try and keep other families from feeling that same pain.
God chose me for a reason. So now I'm that vessel. Gotta be that vessel to reach others. I've had a few of Austin's friends show up at the cemetery when I'm there, and they say his death saved them. They stopped using drugs because of his death. So I just gotta use that and know that there's a bigger picture.
Austin is not alone. Overdoses in Madison County soared in the past year. In 2020, Madison County averaged 64 overdoses per month. This year to date, that average is up to 77.
A patient one time that overdosed that morning, and that patient was transported to the emergency department where they were treated and released, and that same day, that evening, the patient had overdosed again and unfortunately succumbed.
Overdoses not only increasing in quantity, but in intensity. Fentanyl, now to blame for 3 out of every 4 overdose deaths.
Fentanyl is about 100 times the strength of morphine alone. Just a couple grains is enough to kill the average adult. Sometimes the batches can be so hot, so potent with the mix, that people can die with the needle still in their arm.
It's him and his sister.
Denise's daughter told her Austin had bought 2 fentanyl patches right before his death.
He knew what he was dealing with. It was a patch for cancer patients, and he actually ingested it. So he took a piece of that patch, chewed on it, and they go into cardiac arrest.
North Alabama's drug of choice and how it's used is always changing, but the need to help addicts will always be there.
They can live a normal life and stay alive and become a vessel to help other addicts. I think that, look at it different.
A lot of people do recover. They'll come to a halfway house, a place like the Reprieve here in Decatur, to get back on their feet.
But a lot of times when they come to places like this, they have little to nothing. So that's where Hunter Sandifer comes in. Her mission begins where her fiance's ended.
It started with an unfinished list.
And it's in Zack's handwriting.
A sign from God.
And it has everything of what I would find: towel, washcloth, toothbrush, toothpaste,
food, non-perishable items, toiletries, just basic necessity things.
Those items helped Zack Sandifer recover from his opioid addiction. Now those same items are being used to help others.
God had bigger plans, and so right now, as far as I'm aware, I am distributing to every single halfway house in Morgan County.
These
and
baskets
that is what makes a Zack Pack a Zack Pack.
now fill Hunter Sandifer's garage. She's working to fulfill Zack's wishes of helping men and women battling addiction, providing them with basic necessities Zack once found himself in need of.
He wanted to be on the way to starting a ministry that does outreach or could reach people like him. And the whole point of Zack Packs is to show others the love and compassion that he had for everybody whenever he was still alive.
Addiction didn't take Zack's life. On June 4, 2020, he died in a wreck of I-65. A friend called Hunter that morning after seeing the wreck.
Immediately in my gut, something was wrong.
She called Zack, no answer. He didn't show up to work. Hunter eventually left work and drove to the scene.
Took off running to him and I said, I need to know if this is my fiance. I need to know. I said, his name is Zack Sandifer. He's 6 foot, he's got brown hair and green eyes, and he's wearing a ball cap. And I need to know if it's my fiance.
Authorities told her to wait at the scene as she sat on the back of a police car.
And that's when I saw the coroner drive by.
Moments later, her worst fear became a reality.
Instead of planning our wedding, I had to plan his funeral. And, you know, I don't wish that on anybody. He loved me and the boys.
Even though Hunter still feels a part of her was taken that day, she knows Zack's story lives on.
This is how I'm keeping Zack alive, in mine and my family and his family. This is how I'm keeping him alive. 2 packs of crackers, with the lemon crackers in there. Since January, you know, I've passed out 407. And I've met majority of the people that I've given Zack Packs out to, and every single one of them, they are just so thankful.
Hunter delivers Zack's packs to halfway houses across Morgan County. This one in particular, ran by Zack's close friend.
I don't know, he was just one of the first ones that came up to me. He took me under his wing, calmed me down, told me things were gonna be okay. We ended up working at the same plant, and he just coaxed me along through them first few really rough months.
Jeremy Fairbanks, now 3 years sober, is constantly reminded of what Zack always stood by.
God puts certain people in your life at certain times, and I firmly believe that he put Zack Sandifer in that place to save my life.
I want to show our boys, you know, not only was he an amazing father from all the stories that I have to tell them when they get older, but I want to show them that he was a great man.
Right now, there's no end in sight when it comes to this drug epidemic, but how North Alabama responds will change.
There are ways to get help if you're struggling with addiction. Resources are available and people are ready to listen.
Thank you for watching this special presentation of WAAY 31 News. For more than 60 years, North Alabama has turned to WAAY 31 for trusted news, weather, and information. Coverage you can count on air, online, on your phone. WAAY 31.